It's negative 30 degrees outside your shelter, and the wind hasn't stopped screaming for 6 days. You're 20,000 years ago, somewhere on the open tundra of Ice Age Europe. There are no trees here, not really, just frozen grassland stretching to a horizon you can't see through the blowing snow. The nearest forest is days away, and the only reason you're not already dead is a fire that has to be fed every single hour. A shelter built largely from the bones of an animal 10 times your size, and clothing that was sewn, not draped, stitched together with a needle thinner than a matchstick. Here's the number that should stop you cold. Your body, biologically, is a tropical animal. Bare skin, almost no fur, a design built over millions of years for the heat of the African savannah, not for a wind that can drop your core temperature to lethal levels in under an hour. And yet, somehow, people didn't just survive an ice age in a body built for the tropics. They thrived through it for tens of thousands of years, across some of the coldest, most hostile terrain this planet has ever produced. So how does a hairless, heat-loving primate make it through a world locked in ice? The answer involves needles, mammoth bones, and a mistake that could kill you even with a full belly. Let's get into it. Let's start with an uncomfortable fact. If you dropped a modern human naked into an ice age winter, you wouldn't last the night. Hypothermia doesn't need extreme cold to kill you. It just needs time, wind, and exposed skin. Your fingers go numb first. Then your judgment starts to slip, which is the truly dangerous part, because a cold, confused person makes worse decisions right when the decisions matter most. Your shivering eventually stops, not because you've warmed up, but because your body is running out of the energy it needs to keep shivering at all. After that, it's a matter of hours. Every other cold-adapted animal on that Ice Age landscape had some built-in advantage you didn't. The woolly mammoth had a coat of hair up to a meter long and a layer of fat several inches thick. The woolly rhinoceros had the same. Even the reindeer had a coat engineered with hollow, insulating hairs. You had none of that. You were, and still are, essentially a naked ape standing in a blizzard. So why weren't humans wiped out the moment the ice sheets advanced? Because somewhere along the way, we stopped relying on our bodies to solve the problem and started relying on our hands and our minds instead. Every other animal on that tundra was wearing the only coat it would ever have. We learned to build new ones. The strangest weapon that helped humans beat the Ice Age was smaller than your finger. It wasn't a spear, it wasn't a knife, an axe, or a fire-hardened point. It may have done more to keep our species alive through the cold than any weapon ever forged. It was a needle. At Denisova Cave in Siberia, archaeologists recovered one carved from bird bone, with a tiny eye drilled through one end, dated to roughly 50,000 years ago. It's one of the oldest known eyed needles ever discovered. And that single object changes the entire story of Ice Age survival. Think about what a needle actually makes possible. Without one, the best you can do with an animal hide is drape it over your shoulders. Wind gets underneath it. Snow gets in through the gaps. With a needle, you can do something completely different. You can cut hide into shaped pieces and stitch them into fitted clothing, tailored sleeves, sealed seams, layered garments that trap warm air against your skin instead of letting it leak out with every gust of wind. At a burial site called Sungir in Russia, dated to around 34,000 years ago, archaeologists found something remarkable. Thousands of ivory beads, arranged in careful lines across the skeletons, not scattered randomly. The beads followed the exact shape that fitted clothing would take, tracing the outline of long sleeves, fitted trousers, and boots that had completely decomposed thousands of years earlier. The clothing itself was gone. The pattern of the decoration told researchers precisely what it must have looked like. And at Dolní Věstonice in the modern Czech Republic, researcher Olga Sofer and her team found something even stranger. Tiny impressions of woven fiber pressed into hardened clay, dated to around 27,000 years ago. Actual textile, woven cordage from people we tend to picture wearing nothing but crude furs. Here's the thing that should genuinely surprise you. Neanderthals were themselves highly cold adapted, with sturdier builds and their own long history of surviving glacial Europe. But some researchers now point to this specific technology, tailored, layered, wind-sealed clothing, as evidence that our species developed a different cold weather strategy, one built around more advanced tailoring. Neanderthal sites show plenty of scrapers for working hides, but almost no eyed needles like the ones found at Denisova. That single difference in toolkits may help explain why our species was able to push so far into the coldest, most exposed environments on the planet. Clothing solved half the problem. The other half was shelter. And on the open, treeless tundra of the Ice Age, that came with a very specific engineering problem. There was no wood. Picture the landscape at a site called Mezerich in modern Ukraine, roughly 15,000 years ago. No forest for miles, no timber to build a frame. And yet, archaeologists excavated the remains of an actual structure there, a dome-shaped dwelling built largely from the bones of woolly mammoths, likely combined with hides, wood, and other materials wherever they were available. Skulls stacked as a foundation, long leg bones angled upward like structural beams, curved tusks layered over the top, interlocked like a puzzle to hold the whole frame together. That is not a lucky pile of bones. That is architecture. Building it required knowing which bones could bear weight, how to interlock tusks so the structure wouldn't collapse under snow load, and how many mammoths worth of material it would even take, which at some sites is well over 20 animals. This wasn't something one person figured out during a single storm. It was engineering knowledge, refined and passed down across generations, the same way any technology improves over time. Once the frame existed, it would have been covered with hides and packed with turf and snow itself for insulation. Snow, it turns out, is a genuinely excellent insulator when packed correctly. It traps still air the same way a blanket does. Ancient builders across the Arctic understood this instinctively, long before anyone had a word for thermal insulation. And inside that shelter, every single night, there had to be fire. Not fire as decoration, fire as the one non-negotiable variable standing between the people inside and death. Keeping it burning meant a constant, coordinated effort, gathering fuel in a landscape with almost no wood, which often meant burning animal bone and dry dung instead, and someone awake to tend it through every hour of the longest, darkest nights of the year. None of this worked in isolation. A shelter without fire is just a windbreak. Fire without shelter burns through fuel and heat in minutes. Clothing without either just delays the inevitable by a few hours. It was the combination, tailored clothing, engineered shelter, and managed fire, working together as a single system that let people live through winters that should have erased them. But surviving the cold wasn't enough. There was another enemy hiding inside every successful hunt, and it was invisible because it struck people who weren't hungry at all. Here's the twist almost nobody expects. In the depths of an Ice Age winter, you could eat meat every single day, plenty of it, and still slowly starve to death. It's a real, documented condition, sometimes called rabbit starvation, first formally described by Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson in the 20th century, but understood by cold climate hunters for far longer. Eaten on its own, without enough fat alongside it, lean protein overwhelms what the liver can process. Eat nothing but lean meat like rabbit, no matter how much of it, and your body begins to fail. In severe cases, it's fatal, while your stomach feels completely full. That's why fat, not meat in general, was the most valuable resource on the Ice Age landscape. Archaeologists find this written directly into the bones at ancient hunting sites, smashed open again and again to reach the marrow. Skulls cracked for fat-rich brain tissue. Organs and marrow prioritized over lean muscle, not out of craving, but because hunters had learned the hard way across countless winters exactly what a body needs to survive extreme cold. That single piece of knowledge, fat over lean meat, may have quietly saved more lives during the Ice Age than any single tool or shelter design. It leaves no dramatic ruins behind, just a pile of shattered bones that, read correctly, tells you someone already understood a nutritional truth modern science wouldn't formally explain for thousands of years. So would you have survived an Ice Age winter? It wouldn't have come down to toughness. The cold does not care how strong you are. It would have come down to knowledge. Whether your community knew how to cut and stitch a garment that actually sealed against the wind. Whether someone understood how to stack mammoth-bone into a structure that wouldn't collapse under snow. Whether the people around you knew, without ever needing a word for nutrition science, to reach for the fat before the lean meat. None of it was luck. It was accumulated, tested, transmitted knowledge, built by people who had absolutely no margin for error. Because a wrong guess about clothing, shelter, or food didn't just cost you comfort, it cost you your life, and possibly the lives of everyone depending on you. We tend to imagine Ice Age humans as barely surviving, huddled, and desperate. The evidence tells a very different story. These were engineers, tailors, and nutritionists in every sense that mattered, solving one of the hardest environmental problems our species has ever faced, with nothing but bone, hide, sinew, fire, and each other. And every single one of your ancestors lived through it. Every winter, every storm, every year the ice didn't retreat. Not one of them failed to make it through, which is the only reason there's anyone left to ask how they did it. If you enjoyed uncovering the real history behind one of humanity's coldest survival stories, subscribe to Ancient Actually. Every week, we separate myth from evidence and reveal the remarkable ways ancient people survived a world that was far harsher than most of us can imagine. Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about discovering why it happened and what it can still teach us today.